really, I think, a dynamic and unique program that supports local farmers and helps provide good, nutritious foods to the local school system, because Cincinnati school system adopted the Good Foods Procurement Program about a year ago. I think they would have implemented it this year, except for COVID. So I don't know how that stands at this point.
Thank you. Very good.
That's awesome.
And Joe is on camera this time. So
oh, this is wonderful. We can see everyone now.
All right. And I just see fractals of you all, so it's all good. Shall we begin?
We are live now, Elaine, so we can go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us today in this town hall. We're going to talk about fighting for family farmers, and we are privileged to have many wonderful guests with us. Let me begin by thanking the Enoch for Congress campaign because they are hosting today's call. And I want to introduce myself. My name is Elaine Hansen. I am the moderator today. I'm also the president of the Hansen Resource Development Company, and it's a consulting business that designs workshops, coaches. We facilitate connections and conversations, and my passion, which is building community wherever I show up. Also, I want to introduce Dr. Vanessa Enoch. She is of the Enoch. She is running for Congress in the 8th District of Ohio. She is also the founder and CEO of Cultural Impact LLC, a business management consulting firm based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and her main focus is public policy and social change. And now let me introduce our guests for today. Joe Logan, who's down, well, on my screen, he's at, I shouldn't say where he is on my screen. He is a 5th generation farmer, which is pretty impressive. He's in the Northeastern Ohio area. He currently is the president of the Ohio Farmers Union, and he is a father of 3 grown children and a grandfather of 5. So thank you, Joe, for joining us. We have Chris Gibbs. Chris is a farmer and rancher who owns and operates 560 acres with 90 beef cows in West Central Ohio. He is retired from the United States Department of Agriculture after 30 years of administering federal farm programs to farmers through the Farm Service Agency. Tony Logan, let's see, where's Tony? There's Tony. Tony is currently a renewable energy and food systems consultant in Columbus. He previously served as the USDA's Ohio Rural Development Director during the 2 terms of the Obama administration. He is the chairperson of the Columbus and Franklin County Local Food Board, and he also sits on the Vice President's Advisory Council for the Ohio State University's College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. And we have Mike Mackey, who's there, is the Field Operations Director for the National Farmers Organization and Acting Regional Director for the state of California. He has been with National Farmers for 7 years, and he initially began with them as the dairy field representative. And I'm sure dairy will come up somewhere in his conversations. He resides in Anna, Ohio with his wife and 2-year-old son, a little one. Bill Miller. Bill Miller is the vice president of the Ohio Farmers Union. He and his wife own and operate a 160-acre certified organic farm in southwestern Ohio, which is near Oxford, but he tells me it's in Preble County. So he is also the chairperson of the Experience Works, formerly known as the Green Thumb. He found which was founded in 1965 to meet the job and training needs of low-income rural adults. He was appointed to the USDA Minority Farmer Advisory Committee in 2014, and he currently is the vice chair of this national 15% committee. He is also the treasurer of the NAACP Oxford unit. And Roger Wise, where are you, Roger? Roger has been a full-time family farmer for 50 years, currently farms 700 acres of corn and soy. He is past president of the Ohio Farmers Union. He served as county soil and water district supervisor, a county health board member, a township trustee, and the county school board. He has 2 married daughters and 3 grandchildren. So thank you all for joining us today. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Vanessa to welcome and greet all of us and set a context.
Thank you so much, Elaine, and welcome to our distinguished panel. I am really excited in hosting this panel today. Our objective is to have a discussion with our farm community to draw attention to the importance of Ohio's family farms and the vitality of rural communities. I've been advocating for broadband in rural communities, renewable energy, better trade policies, and I believe that all of these things will be important if our farm community is to survive and thrive. Many farmers in the 8th congressional district are in jeopardy of losing their farms and livelihoods. In 4 years, the number of dairy farms in Ohio has dropped from 2,600 to 2,000, 1/4 of the industry. Also, corn and soybean crops have experienced some of the lowest harvest in years. A record number of small farmers are seeking economic relief by applying for government loans and filing for bankruptcy. Many local farmers and ranchers have made it clear that they aren't interested in government handouts to offset the damage that's done by the bad trade policies. In the long run, farmers need access. They need access to new markets so that they are less reliant on China, Canada, and Mexico. And until effective policy is implemented, however, there remains a need for subsidies. So under the current administration, US trade policies have harmed our agricultural industry. I don't disagree with the use of tariffs as effective trade policies. I simply believe that all policy needs to be well thought out. Unfortunately, policymakers are doubling down by making it difficult for struggling families, even in the midst of the pandemic, to access food through programs such as child nutrition programs and supplemental nutrition assistance programs that feed hungry children and families. My opponent insisted on adding stringent work requirements for SNAP recipients to the Farm Bill before agreeing to vote for it. So essentially what he's saying is that if you can't find a job, you deserve to starve. The global pandemic, which has put nearly 40 million Americans out of work, demonstrates why such policy decisions are a bad idea. The US must urgently expand trade with current trade partners and identify new markets where farmers can sell their products going forward. There's also a need to support diversification of crops. And earlier this year, I got the pleasure of meeting some of these farmers at the Farmers Union Convention in Lima, Ohio. And it was enlightening for me to learn more about the benefits of hemp and CBD oil and the importance of industrial hemp production to Ohio's agricultural future. We don't know all the answers, or at least I don't know all the answers, but my goal is to give these farmers and all constituents a direct link to develop policy by introducing bipartisan policy advisory circles in each of the 6 counties of the 8th district. And today, I expect that we're going to learn more about some of the challenges that family-sized farms face on several fronts, including the failed trade agreements, a trade war with China, the pandemic, weak prices, and declining farm income. And I believe our distinguished panelists can also shed light on some of the factors that are leading to the loss of dairy farmers and depressed farm milk prices. And perhaps also the importance of renewable fuel standards and the role that they play in promoting the economic viability of family farmers during times of financial stress. So again, I want to welcome our panelists. I am excited that you all are joining us today. I hope our audience will learn something, and that it'll give everybody a better understanding of what we need to do as constituents, or what we need to understand as constituents in this current environment. So Elaine, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. As we move into the conversations, I just want to say that if I ask a question that you don't want to answer, or you're not ready to answer, passing is fine, and you can respond when you feel moved to speak, so to say. And we'll probably spend 10 to 15 minutes, but there are 6 of you, so maybe it's more like 20 to 25 minutes on each question to give each of you space to respond. With that in mind, I would ask, when you respond to the question, to limit it to 3 to 5 minutes, to leave space for each other to respond to the question. And I just want to say that as I prepared for today's conversation, I thought about how different my world of work is compared to the farmer's world of work. And I know in different work environments, we use language differently. And so I'm just curious, with that in mind, I talked to Joe some about this, but I'm wondering if you could help us non-farmers with a little bit of language to understand as we move through the conversations, that we'll have a better understanding of what you mean when you use certain words. And so the 2 words that come to mind for me is when you use the word family farm, what does that mean to you? And when you use the word industrial farming, what does that mean to you? And I wondered if Joe and I talked about this some, and I wondered if Joe or someone else would like to help us give us a definition, or what those words mean to you when you say them.
Well, Elaine, maybe I can start out. As we discussed earlier, the family farm is going to be the kind of keystone for what the Farmers Union has advocated for 118 years, should be the primary component of our agricultural production system, and that's for food, fiber, and fuel. And we know that the network of family farms that we've established over this country in the last 250 years or so has been extremely effective at producing the food, fuel, and fiber that this nation needs, and ample amounts for exports as well. And that system of family farms, millions of family farms across the nation, farmers and ranchers, is in jeopardy now. And it's in jeopardy because the US Congress has turned its back on their responsibility to enact, and the administration has turned its back on their responsibility to enforce antitrust laws that were put in place up to 100 years ago. Those were designed to protect our system and to support family farms. And frankly, the Congress has walked away from that responsibility, and as a result, millions of family farms across the country are in jeopardy. We define a family farm as a family-based operation in which the family owns the livestock and the machinery and the land. They take the economic risk to perform on that land and to produce on that land, and they do the lion's share of the actual work. And this varies from the sort of corporate or industrial farm in which an owner that may be in another state or another nation actually owns the farm. They may contract a number of contractors to perform work on that farm. They import almost all of their products they use, and they export most of the products that they produce rather than trying to integrate it with the local community. So that's the kind of differentiation that I see there.
Thank you. Thank you. Did he miss anything? Is there anything you all would like to add before I give you the next question?
Now, I just want to add that most Americans, when they think about farming and farmers, they think about the family farm and family farming, whereas in reality, most of our food is being generated by these industrial farms that are operate in ways that I think family farmers would not operate. So
I think as we get into this, there'll be space for you to talk
Right.
more about that. So thank you for that.
If I could, I'd like to.
Sure, Chris.
Well over 90%, and I'm being generous because I don't want to get hooked up into exact percentages, but probably greater than 93% of farms in the United States are family farms. There are certain structures. Many of these farms are corporations. They might be limited liability companies, what have you. I have a limited liability company myself, Gibbs Farms. That was built to bring my son and my daughter-in-law and my daughter into the operation without having to redeed land. So it made it very, very simple. Many of these corporate farms are still family farms, and they may be just two shareholders, a man and a wife. So a lot of different structures out there, but folks need to be heartened. They need to feel good that the family farm is alive. It is doing, it's not doing really well, but it's alive and well, I should say, as far as a unit. When people say industrial farms, that is I guess more of trying to downplay what agriculture does. And the reason I say that, family farms use some industrial processes. We just have to do that to meet the efficiencies that we need. The amount of animals that we put in a building, and so forth. We need to do that. And to some, that appears industrialized. But what it ensures is that we have a cheap and abundant and safe food supply for our nation. So we need to really be cautious when we say industrialized farming and use it in the pejorative, because it's not necessarily always that way. Now, I'll add one other thing that we can chat about later, but we've heard about, and Joe brought this up, and he's exactly right. There are industrial complexes, and they are starting to be less of them that control more livestock and more of the agricultural output. And we saw that in spades, if you will, in a big way, that was exposed through the COVID event that we just went through over the last 4 months. When somebody went to, when a wife, a husband, I don't care who it was, ended up at the grocery store and found empty shelves of meat, you can trace that all the way back to the concentration in the packing industry. And what Joe was talking about of antitrust is exactly a conversation that we really need to have with the American people. Not that production of my corn and soybeans and my cattle is all concentrated. That's not the issue. It's the next step on the vertical integration of getting that crop from the farm to the first buyer, and then on to the second buyer and on to the shelf. That's where the concentration is. And it would seem to me that a legislator would want to have a conversation with the American people and say, hey, we have really restricted this at one step prior to the consumer. And any little thing that happens, I'm not suggesting that COVID was a little thing, but any black swan that swoops down upon that system can disrupt it in a big way, and that's what happened. So there's a conversation that needs to be had there, probably for later in the program.
Thank you. So as I move into the next question, one of the things I'd like to invite is everyone that is watching, as I present the questions, I invite you to notice what shows up for you when I ask the question, reflect on the question that I'm giving to our panelists. And if you would like, you can share in the chat, or depending what technology you're using, maybe it's in a comment below kind of thing, because we'd like to hear your reflections on these questions and the responses that you're hearing from our panelists today. So, the first question that I'd really like to ask you is, and this will allow you to take whatever your specialty is and maybe focus on it from there, is why is it important to you to be part of today's conversation on family farms? Why is it important to you to be here today and part of this conversation on family farms? And who would like to go first?
Well,
I'll try that one. Go ahead, Tony.
I'll start off.
We'll start with Tony and then we'll go to Roger. How's that?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tony Logan. And I think it's important, it's critical, because we're really at a critical juncture in the opportunity to provide necessary amenities and infrastructure to our rural communities, or they may dry up and blow away. We've already heard the discussion of downturns in our agricultural economy, that's apparent. But let's look at some of the other areas where rural economies have been suffering. The need for high-speed broadband in rural areas has never been more apparent than in these last 5-6 months of the COVID. I mean, kids that are studying remotely in rural areas may have to ask their mom or dad to drive them into the nearest city and pull into the Starbucks parking lot so they can upload their homework assignment. And of course, looking at the farmers that are trying to deploy these precision ag and GPS technologies to their farming operations, that may never happen unless we get strong, reliable, high-speed broadband in those rural areas. And I haven't even mentioned the rural businesses that really form the backbone of these small towns. They need to be able to sell their products to the world and communicate with the world. And for that, you need reliable broadband service. And, our grandfathers back in the 30s and 40s had the foresight to bring electricity to the last mile farmer on the rural route through what is now the rural utility service. And we need to use that same technology and the same institutional support to bring broadband internet to the last mile user in the rural communities.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And anything more, Roger?
Yes, I'm glad to be on this just because I think we need some new faces in Congress, and I hope the doctor is successful. And we have laid bare with this COVID epidemic the failings of our farm policy. As Chris so aptly described the industrial folks, we were, during COVID, we had extremely low prices in dairy and commodities and livestock, and yet the processors continued to make a huge profit margin, as did the grocers on the other end, while the shelves were bare, and the consumers were the ones that paid the dear price for that. As far as the rural communities go, I know in my community, I don't think ours is very much different than all across the Midwest. We've got farmers that are in the 40 to 55-year-old age bracket, and those folks are hurting with the low commodity prices. We overproduce, and that is the crux of the problem in my opinion. And historically, prior to 1980 or even sooner, we had farm policy that balanced supply and demand so that consumers maintain their relative good supply and cost structure, and farmers were able to stay in business. And we have abandoned that for the industrial folks so that they can have very low price commodities, and as a result their profits are at a high level, and we farmers are dependent upon government subsidies that cost far too much. If we crafted policy that would, we can craft policy that allows the taxpayer to pay far fewer dollars and create an environment for family farmers to stay in business and get a living from the market, which is what we all would rather do.
Thank you.
Good for now.
Thank you.
Elaine,
Yes?
I'd like to add to that if that's okay.
Oh, certainly. Go right ahead. There's space for all of you to respond.
All righty. With respect to the family farms and where I'm coming from as being employed with the National Farmers Organization, I just recently wrote a paper, an op-ed. It made it around some of the papers in the country called "The Benefits of Saving the Family Dairy Farm." And one of the things I did in the paper to try to illustrate a point is what does a farm, what does the family farm mean to rural America exactly? And I had 4 producers that I know, they actually went through their back taxes the year before to see what they spent accumulatively over the year into the local community. And it was over $2 million. Now, one of those farms went out of business. Now they were only $265,000, but that's $265,000 not going in the community.
Right.
Now, you look at what farms support locally. They support implement dealers, which is your equipment dealers, your animal sales, truckers, veterinary and seed sales, grain elevators, fuel and oil dealers, insurance companies, equipment repair shops, building and maintenance
Right.
operations, farm suppliers, local banks, schools, churches.
Yeah.
If we don't have family farms anymore, these guys are
Right.
going out of business.
Right.
And so whomever's in Congress, that's got to start being paid attention to, that if our family farms don't become a priority, if they don't matter, and we're going to start picking winners and losers here, which sometimes I feel that's what's going on. It's not just going to be the farm that goes out. It's going to be
Right.
rural America that goes out, and that will bleed over into urban America. That will hit Cincinnati. It will hit Dayton. It will hit Columbus.
Right.
It's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
It all goes together. So that's why we got to save family farms. That's a big part of it right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. I think we forget how interconnected we all are, and the ripple effect that can happen. And you just illustrated that in talking about that one dairy farm going out of business and what that meant to the immediate community as well as the extended community. So thank you. Thank you. Bill, you have anything you want to add to that question, or what's important to you to be here today?
To be here today.
And part of this conversation.
As part of this conversation, yes, I have a major concern about rural areas and rural communities, and I can see how the rural communities around this area are struggling because family farmers and the family farm is struggling. And so all of the local gas stations and grocery stores that used to exist in these small communities don't exist anymore. They all close up. And so it's extremely important to support family farmers and find ways to generate more income for family farmers, because most of they're struggling because they only get a small piece of what the pie that's our food supply, and most of the money is going to the middleman. Mm-hmm. And the family farmer, even though he's out there working, is really struggling. And I don't know what else to say about it.
That's all right.
So
Nope,
I'm just
nope.
gonna tell everybody out, they've
just-
already
To
really covered.
to put an exclamation point on Bill's comments. I looked back the statistics in 1980. The farmer actually kept 38% of every food dollar that went out off the farm. The farmer got 38% of that. In 2018, that percentage had reduced to 14.8. Now, those are billions and billions and billions of dollars that used to stay there in those rural communities and are now going up to those big national and global corporations. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing such depopulation in communities.
You took my breath away when you said it's dropped to 14%.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
It's still going down.
Wow. You know, Elaine, one of the things I waited on Mike to say when he was talking about the importance of the family farmer, I waited on him to say something about the fact that they provide our food supply. You know, every single person in this country is impacted by these farmers and what they do. And more than anything, it's important that our food is grown here in America. We regulate our food. We know what goes into it. We can kind of control what happens when our food supply is grown here at home. And so I think that that's a very important thing that has to be said. For me, the reason why it was so important to me in my campaign to engage with farmers is my family's from a rural area. We're from Portsmouth, Ohio. And, you know, I understood at a very early age the importance of farmers and our food supply, and was very connected in that way. And I was telling a story as I got older and moved away from Portsmouth and moved into the big city, well, the suburbs of the big city. Still really haven't had much of a big city experience. However, when I moved away, I had moved abroad, lived abroad for a while. And when I went abroad, I was telling these guys before we got started, you know, of how disconnected I was from that rural area, and was running down the street. I lived in Swaziland and was running down the street from cows because I became disconnected from, you know, the family farm. But we can't ignore family farms. We have to re-engage for those of us who have disengaged. And we have to make it a priority to ensure that we undergird our family farmers, and that just to show you the importance of this topic, when we posted it on our Facebook page, and I see my connection's unstable, so hopefully you guys can hear me, but when we posted the topic on the Facebook page, somebody chimed in and said, I hope we're going to talk about grants for family farmers. I don't know if anyone on here has any information about resources for family farmers, but that is certainly something that we will follow up with and see if we can find, if no one on this particular chat has any information. But I think it's important that we all re-engage and that we learn as much as we can, and that we begin to fight for our family farmers. That is one of the things that I intend to do in Congress, to ensure that we draw attention to the importance of the family farmer to all of us in this country, and not just those of us who are part of that economy, but for those of us who have to eat, right? So
only those of us that have to eat are concerned.
Exactly.
Elaine, if I may, I appreciate Dr. Enoch mentioning that folks are that she had gotten away from her direct interest in the farm. Because in your question of why we're here, why I'm here, that's the reason, to make sure that we answer questions and that we're available to our non-farm neighbors who continue to be further and further generations away. And that relates in a number of different layers. It relates in Congress through representation. And I'll start with this. Agriculture is a national security interest. Let me say that again. Agriculture is a national security interest, period. And it needs to be held in that regard. And for that, we need to ensure that the American people understand its importance and also its fragility. And that then will transfer through their representatives, through their members of Congress, and will transfer into legislation that provides not bailouts all the time, not raids on the Treasury, not raids on the Commodity Credit Corporation through the United States Department of Agriculture, but it will provide safety nets for agriculture to ensure that agriculture is treated like a national security interest. And finally, it will provide policy through our legislators that you can explain to your neighbors, that you can explain to Mrs. Smith at 102 East Main that was never on the farm before, but you can explain that to her of why it's important to ensure we put a safety net under agriculture so we continue to have a safe and abundant and economical food supply for the American people. There's a part of the earth that learned this lesson the hard way, and that was Europe after World War I and World War II. They know the importance of agriculture. They know what happens when you break down that system. And that's why they protect it with their politics and they protect it with their life.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I feel like that we are at a historical hinge point that I've never lived through anything like this before in my lifetime, and I'm 72 years old. And so I really feel like also in this hinge point, this crisis, this chaos that we seem to be experiencing, that there's an opportunity, there are possibilities that might open up of us doing something different, of us addressing some of the dysfunctional policies that we've made, the dysfunctional ways that we are living our lives and treating each other, all of that. And so thinking in regards to farming and all that, reflecting on all that you have experienced in the world of family farming and those you advocate for, what is the crossroads you face in continuing this journey? What are the possibilities in this crossroads of creating something new or different, or what else can we do? Go ahead.
Well, Chris talked about the safety net, and Chris knows wherever he speaks there, having administered these safety net programs and various programs from USDA over the number of years.
Right.
And as I think Roger mentioned earlier, we used to have a program that was designed to do a couple of things. To balance production and demand for agricultural products, and at the same time to kind of buoy the farm prices so that farmers could support their families. The nation of Canada has done that for their dairy farmers. And as a matter of fact, we brought down a member of the Canadian Dairy Board to talk to our dairy farmers out in Mercer County. That was about a year ago. And the Canadian government actually authorized a group of dairy farmers to determine what a fair price for their dairy product was, and to determine that that was the price that the manufacturers would have to pay. And as a result, they have multi-generational dairy farmers where a young dairy farmer can look at his parents' operation and say, yeah, I can make it doing that. I'm going to stick around. Whereas dairy farms in the United States struggle to even consider that. And it, you know, I'm sure Mike has more experience on this particular issue than I do, having worked in that area very intently. But I know that there are a lot of farms in Mercer County, Ohio, Darke County, Ohio, that are really struggling with this now. And I think one issue that exacerbates that is that there's a major dairy processing center out there, Dannon Yogurt, one of the largest in the country. And they used to be supplied by hundreds and hundreds of dairy farms in the region. And they've recently decided that they are going to work with a major industrialized dairy operation to supplant all that production from those hundreds of farms with production from one or two enormous facilities.
Wow.
I think if we could have Mike comment on his experience with that, it might help to help us to understand. Mike?
Thank you.
National Farmers Organization that I work for, we're an all commodity organization, but probably what we're most known for is marketing milk. And so Dannon is right here in my neck of the woods. And it used to be that all the family farms around here, you could get into Dannon, you'd go in there sometimes, you'd go into some other places. There is a frustration of mine that's occurring, and I'm seeing it, and I brought it up, and it's not being addressed. And a lot of these corporations, these processors, are multinational corporations, and they came in and they built their operations, or they bought existing operations, and they did some glad handing, and hey, we like you guys, and give us a tax break and everything else. And so the communities do that. But now they're taking milk coming in from other states that are tanker loads. I don't know that if any family, and let me rephrase that. By tanker loads, there are some family farms out there that do produce that much. So maybe I should clarify. I don't want to pick on them, but your multinational, giant investor-owned mega dairies, they seem to be really, them and others like them seem to be very interested in doing business with them versus doing business with the farms locally. And so what's happening is we're still, because there's such a demand for cheese, Americans' consumption of cheese, just was something like it's over 58% of our milk goes into cheese today. Like in 1970, it was only 25%. That's been one of the saving graces for family farms. Where we run into an issue though is if I'm a family dairy farmer and I'm milking a couple hundred cows, I can't get into Dannon. I should be going into Dannon. I got great milk. I got quality milk. I can do just as good a job as the guy milking, 5,000 cows. But he gets to go in there. He's coming in from Michigan or some other place, and I'm not begrudging him his success. But now I got to go into Pennsylvania. So now my transportation costs have gone up. And so my little slice of the pie is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm banging my head against the wall, asking myself, what am I doing this for? And that's where a lot of family farms are at right now. They're frustrated because they basically were lied to by these processors that built not just here, but all over the place. And so now you got to ask yourself, is it worth it to stay in? Well, as I indicated earlier about all these different businesses, if these guys go out, we're in a world of hurt. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea that these processors, particularly these multinational processors, this gets back to the national security. You just can't come into this country and say, well, we're going to take advantage of the business and then stick it to the businesses here. You got to support the businesses here locally.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Here again is a conversation that we need to have with the American people. And I think you said, Elaine, a minute ago, we were on some kind of a precipice, or you implied that we were on the edge of something. So I'm going to take that as the edge of a conversation. Certainly, there's no expectation in a country like ours that if you're going to milk 25 cows or 50 cows or you're going to have 100 acres, that you're guaranteed a living. I don't think anybody maybe disputes that. But the chat about the American people with is that think of small farms like a knit in a wool shirt or a cotton shirt, okay? The more small knits you have, the more strength there is in the total system. Think the difference between a wool sweater and a cotton t-shirt, okay? Cotton t-shirt is very strong, and that's because there's small knits. There's very small farms scattered throughout. So that when we have shocks to the system, whether it's weather, whether it's pestilence, whether it's pricing, whether it's bad policy coming from a White House, then the system can take those shocks, okay? When you have it divided up into many, not many like M-I-N-N-I or many, small farm, M-I-M-N-I, small farms, but many farms, M-A-N-Y. When you have it divided up, dispersed among a lot of farms, then we can take those shocks. And here I go clear back to the processors, where we have a very, very limited amount of processors in the livestock business. Once we had an external shock, the whole process, if you will, came crashing down. So again, on the left hand, there's no expectation that every farm should be profitable. I'm not advocating for that. That's up to the farmer, okay? But as a nation, as a people, we need to have a conversation that we want a balance there to ensure that we have a strong enough system to be able to take these external shocks.
Yeah, to build in some resiliency and capacity to handle those shocks. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I guess I want to make sure that all of you are having space to say what you want to say to Congress. Vanessa's running for Congress. If Warren Davidson were here, who is our current congressman in our district, or what district you're in, maybe a different congressman, what is it you want them to hear? What is it you want the Senate to hear about helping you? And how much of this can be controlled locally by our state? What is our state doing to help you in regards to this? And so I would ask you, what else is possible? What kind of advocacy do you need besides educating the people? If it's the process plants, what does that mean? How do we work on that issue? Does that help? Anybody?
I could bore in. Tony, let he raise it.
Yeah, well, one thing that we'd like Congress and everyone to know is that if small towns and rural communities are going to survive, we need to figure out a way to keep the next generation of kids on the farm and in the rural communities. And you can do that by doing some of the things that have already been talked about on this call. One is, bringing reliable high-speed broadband into these communities, because that's how the younger generation communicates now and learns, for good or bad. And also, I think deploying utility scale renewables in the rural regions will not only provide a strong economic benefit for those areas, but provide a reason for young people to stick around and to be part of this green revolution that can and will happen in rural areas, if it's going to happen at all. We also have the ability to have the rural utility service, for example. The rural electric cooperatives have the electric lines that run all the way out to the farms as it is. Right. Why not have them provide rights of ways to nonprofit internet service providers or communities, small town communities that want to bring internet in and have free right of ways for the fiber optic lines to come in on the existing electric utilities in that region. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that. The public paid for them. But that's just an example of some of the things that we can do if we start listening to our better angels rather than
Right.
the existing incumbent internet service providers or
Right.
large manufacturers or processors.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think of some of the services that we take for granted. For instance, even the post office is under attack right now. But where else in the world can you put 55 cents on a stamp and have it go from coast to coast, well, all the way to Hawaii for 55 cents? But that's because we made it a priority. This country made it a priority that everyone should have access. And I think that's true with the internet, as you were talking about it, that everyone's entitled to access. So how do we move people in that direction and recognize that there are some things that we have to rely on coming together and agreeing that these things are important and build on that. We're getting closer to the end, so I want to ask if there was anything else that was important to you to share that you haven't had a chance to share, that didn't fit into my little questions before.
I could take that.
Okay.
Something that I would tell Congress, that I would tell any congressman or senator, is to take back your responsibilities for trade. This administration has hijacked that responsibility, particularly in Section 232 of the Trade Act that applies to tariffs. And when the administration unilaterally applies punitive tariffs to our allies, Canada, Mexico, Australia, Japan, I'm not sure there's a country other than Israel that we haven't picked a fight with. When the administration does that, they've done an end around Congress. And the Section 232 that the administration used does not apply. It essentially says that that there was a national security threat. Well, there was an economic threat, maybe, from countries. Maybe they were doing a better job of negotiating. Maybe we weren't doing a very good job of negotiating. I don't know. But it didn't elevate itself under Section 232 to a national security threat. And what we have is a Congress that ceded its responsibility as a separate and equal branch of government, not to the executive branch, not to the White House, but they ceded it to a man. And Congress sat there and just like idle schoolboys and women sat and did nothing while markets were taken away from farmers. And these were markets that we built over the last 3 decades. In the middle 1980s, agriculture, when there was grain running in the streets, literally running in the streets in the mid 80s, we got on planes, trains, and automobiles, and we flew around the world and we made trade deals. We created markets. We didn't just make sales. We created markets. And those markets were a vehicle to bring dollars back to rural communities, not by the bucketful, not by the truckload, but by the boatload. And those dollars came directly back through agriculture. And if you know anything about agriculture, and if you didn't, you're going to right now, that we don't sit on our money. We get rid of every damn dollar we have, and we give it to the local hardware store. We give it to the fuel store. We give it to the fix-it shop, and we give it to local schools through property taxes because we control the land. So that's what I would tell Congress. Take back your responsibility. The administration did an end-around farm bill. They did a shadow farm bill. We get rid of tariffs, damn dollars. Yeah. We give it to the local hardware store.
Oh, we lost you, Chris.
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Ron, put your 2 cents in now. Thank you. Roger, are you?
There, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Roger. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've been talking a lot about the economic impact on family farmers and local economies, and that's absolutely true. I live up here in eastern northwest Ohio, very near Lake Erie. The northern shore of Sandusky County is bordered on the lake, and we had the famous Toledo water crisis where the folks couldn't drink water. We have a tremendous tourism impact on the lake, and 5 or 6 million people depend on Lake Erie for drinking water. And most experts have agreed that in large part, the reason for the water quality issue is because of because of corporate ag. We have too many animal units in the region for the ability for the soil to digest that excess phosphorus, if you will, and that's created this issue. So that lends credence to the notion that we need to dilute the pool, maintain family farmers, strong family farmers with a safety net that you all have talked about, that makes family farms sustainable, because frequently we hear that we don't produce any more livestock numbers now than we did 30 years ago. But 30 years ago, we had a far more diluted pool of producers rather than the industrial size we have now, which leads to a host of problems that the longer we ignore is going to be more expensive and more difficult to deal with. Thank you, Elaine. That's good. Okay.
He's pointing to me. Can't hear me? Am I not being heard? What happened?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
I can hear you, Elaine.
Volume's low.
I would like
Your
to
volume
add,
is low, by the way.
Please?
Your volume is low now. You
Oh, it
were
went
very
down.
clear at first.
Oh, it went down. Oh, I thought because I was on my headset, it wouldn't go down. Is that better? How's that?
Yes, it's a little better.
Yes, that's
Oh, wow. Okay, good. Because you all are really loud in my ears. This is that problem with my computer. Yeah. All of a sudden it adjusts itself. Okay. No, I was wondering, Vanessa, you said there's some people that have asked questions. Did you want to
Yep, we have
start take
some-
questions now? You want
Yep,
to do
we
that?
have some questions in the audience. So I am going to see if we can promote some of the people in the audience to ask their questions. I saw a question come through as well from Dr. Herman Najoli, and I don't see him. I'm not able to see him, but his question is, apprenticeship is critical. Tony's comment on making it next generation is, he has APT. Technology must be utilized to drive young people toward family farms. TV shows like Yellowstone have shown an interest in family ranching. Can games and simulations be utilized to draw younger folk into family farms? So he's just exploring some possibilities to get people interested in family farms. I'm gonna promote Tracy Baker. I know Tracy had a question. Tracy, do you want to ask your question? If so, you can go ahead and ask it now. You have been unmuted. I see her computer is still on mute. If there's anybody else who'd like to ask a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand or just indicate in the chat, and we will allow you to be promoted to ask your question. Tracy did post her question in a private chat. She said, from your perspectives, did China tariffs help or harm family farms?
Chris, that's for you.
We've been absolutely hurt. There's absolutely no question. Tariffs were imposed in punitive tariffs were imposed in March of 2018. And what the administration either didn't know or didn't care to know was that other countries would protect themselves. And so other countries retaliated right away. And they retaliated into the United States of America's soft underbelly, which is agriculture. So they then made our products going into their country, specifically China, and that was your question, too expensive and non-competitive within that country. So the policy of the administration for applying tariffs to China had the effect of making Brazil great again, because Brazil for soybeans is now, China is their best new customer. So what happens is we lost all of that, and I literally mean all of those sales in the soybean complex. And let me tell you how big a deal that is. We were putting 33%, one third of all of the soybeans grown in the United States were going to China in the first half of 2018. By July, none were going to China. What that means is this: you're making $60,000 somewhere. Your boss comes out and says, hey, I made one of our best customers. Matter of fact, I made our only customer really mad. And so tomorrow you're only going to be making 40,000, but that's okay. I'll go ahead and run around the world and I'll make it up somehow. And I'll put $1,000 in your stocking. See ya. That's what happened to American agriculture.
Wow.
And make no mistake, thank you, Chris. Make no mistake, American farmers are sincerely appreciative of the so-called trade Trump tax, or trade tax, that dollars that came into farmers' pockets. It has been essential to try to keep farm families up and operational. Unfortunately, a lot of those trade dollars went to very large industrial integrated corporations and not to family farms. And even if they had all come to family farms, as Chris mentioned earlier, that's not the way that we should design farm policy, by driving farmers broke and then putting money in their pocket to try to keep them whole again. That's no way to run a railroad or an agricultural operation. So we need rational policy that makes the market work well for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, these numbers are like giving me a heart attack every time, you guys. You know, I'm still back there at that I forgot what, I didn't write down what year it was that the farmers used to keep 38% of the
1980.
1980, and now they only have 14%. And it's decreasing. It's continuing to decrease. And that's like, you can't stay in business if you're only making a 14%. And I use profit, but it's, I guess that would be
revenue.
Is that revenue? 14% of your revenue. Yeah. Yeah. So,
I would jump up and down to 14%.
Okay, well, say it better than I did, Chris. But
I would jump up and down if I had a 14% profit margin.
Okay.
Yeah, that's 2018 number.
How about
much lower?
That was 2018.
Yeah.
So in 2 years, it's decreased.
Yeah, 28.
Yeah, so that is just really, yeah, I've been trying to write down some of these numbers and I'm just like, how do you keep farming? I mean, really. And
I think somebody earlier asked about assistance, and that it was part of one of the individual's questions, and it was brought up really early about grants or something like that.
Yes.
The United States Department of Agriculture through the Farm Service Agency and other agencies, also what Tony used to administer in the state, provides programming to help young farmers get started. Liquidity and the ability to find credit is the biggest reason that we can't or that we have trouble maybe moving younger folks into the farm. Those programs are available. You still have to pay the principal of a farm that you buy, but the terms are spread out over 40 years instead of 20. And the interest rate is extremely, extremely low and way beyond competitive. So that then gives that young producer, that young farmer, liquidity, and it gives them cash flow, working capital, if you will, to be able to continue to pay their obligations through mortgages, but then to continue to buy supplies. So those programs are available. They're available from the United States Department of Agriculture, along with the safety net programs, crop insurance, and so forth that are still out there. So there are ways for young folks to be able, creative ways for young folks to be able to get into agriculture and eke out a living.
Yeah.
Speaking of eking out a living, I want to add to what he just said, and that is we've got to start thinking about the next generation because of all the dairy farmers that are aging right now.
Right.
You know, we have to ask ourselves, do we want family farms? Do we want to keep our rural community strong? Do we want an industry that's controlled, for instance, by a few large consolidated mega whatever? And you know, are we going to have vertical integration? And if the answer is no, we see the value in family farms and we need to protect them, then we've also got to put certain protections in place that are going to allow the people to make a living off these farms. Because one of the things that I run into, I'll tell you what a dairy farmer went through 40 years ago and 30 years ago versus what they have to do now is like night and day. The professionalism there, the business that's there, the quality that they have to maintain because of the requirements into the plants and things like that. And one of the frustrations that I ran into as a field rep, whereas 25, 30 years ago, you went on the farm, you had dad there, mom was there, and the kids were there. Now you have people working off the farm. They're just trying to keep the farm, so they got to go work off the farm to hold on to the homestead.
Right.
You know, so they're not the generation that loses it. And I'm gonna tell you something. If you've ever been, and I'm sure some of you have, if you ever been on a farm and you watch somebody break down and start crying because they don't know how they're going to do it, you know, and they didn't cause this problem.
No.
They didn't cause this problem. This was caused by an apathetic and complacent that, you know, they're just looking at the dollars and cents. They're not looking at all the interconnection, as I think Dr. Enoch made a reference to, that we are all interconnected and we're not mutually exclusive. So I guess I would just say this: bigger is not always better. And we need to, I believe in balance. And I'm not saying that nobody has a right to compete in business, but I do think that whatever we do, it should raise all tides. And I feel like to some degree with the consolidation that's occurring in agriculture right now, it's not raising the tide of everyone else. It's sucking the water away. So basically boats are getting dry, you know, running aground, and there's nothing they can do. And Congress has got to step up and come up with a plan that's going to benefit this country as a whole, not a few collective individuals and multinational corporations and things like that. I love this country and I love my farmers, and I want to see these guys succeed. And daggone it, I want to see the next generation come in and take them over. This is the most important natural resource, in my opinion. One of the most important natural resources that we have in this country is our family farms. Once we lose them and we lose that know-how,
right.
what are you going to do?
Right. Yeah, I grew up thinking the family farms were the backbone of this country. And I appreciated what Chris said about it. The agriculture is at national security risk if we don't solve this. And this is an opportunity for us to do it, I think, because we're re-examining all the systems and processes that we've piled on top of everything else. And so I'm really grateful that all of you showed up, and it's been very informative for me, and also very moving for me to hear your personal stories and how this is personally harming the farmers. Vanessa, would you like to close? Is there anything more that you'd like to say?
This has been an absolutely incredible conversation. I appreciate everyone on this panel. I think that your voices must be heard, and that it is time that we re-engage as Americans. We have to protect our farms. We have to defend the future of our farms. And I believe that many of the things that have been said here on this forum are the answer to how we do that. I agree with Chris and with Mike, who have expressed, and others who have expressed, that this is indeed a national security issue. And that it's Congress's responsibility, it's our government's responsibility to ensure that we have a viable farm economy. And what has happened to family farms over the past couple of decades with the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, I think it began with that, and some of the issues with the big, huge multinational corporations that have come in and taken over this industry. I think we should all be concerned. So I don't have to reiterate anything that anybody on here said. It's time for us to, as a nation, take a different perspective on how we look at our farm community. And so I think that that point has been driven home here today. Again, I thank each and every one of you who has participated on the panel discussion. I thank our audience for being here to listen to this conversation. And those of you who are watching this on social media, I know that on some of the platforms, they weren't able to hear the conversation. There's something going on with that, but it's okay. I'm going to post it to our social media. We have recorded this. Here we do have audio on Facebook, but people on Twitter and Twitch and on the other StreamYard platform is saying that they're not able to hear. So we will post it so that people are able to see it and hear it on our YouTube channel and on all of our social media as well, because I think that this is important enough of a topic that we want more people, we want a broader audience to hear it. With that being said, again, my name is Dr. Vanessa Enoch, and I'm gonna hand it back over to you in a second, Elaine. Okay. My name is Dr. Vanessa Enoch. What was that, Chris?
There's a question that hasn't been answered yet. There's a young lady, I think her name's Nancy.
Yeah,
okay.
There is.
Okay, so we'll get to Nancy in just a second. For those of you who are watching, I want to invite everybody to visit our Facebook page, enochforcongress.com. You can donate to my campaign there. You can also volunteer. You can sign up to volunteer just by clicking on volunteer, and our volunteer coordinator will get back to you. And we're going to go back to the question in just a second, but I want to say thank you to Elaine as well, Elaine Hansen, who is our political director, for moderating this important discussion, as well as those in the background that people don't see that help put this together, like our researcher, Thomas Glencher. Thank you so much, Thomas. I see that Thomas is also watching. So thanks, Thomas, and our marketing people who got out our press releases, and Ashi and her team. Thank you so much for everybody in the background that's making all of the wheels turn. Just like we can't see our family farmers making the wheels turn, it doesn't mean they're not turning them. And so we want to acknowledge people in the background as well. So Elaine, I'll turn it back over to you for you to take a look at the question and then close this out.
Okay, so I will give you Nancy's question, and then I also have a question. So Nancy's question: is there a publicity campaign which advertises the availability of loans that you talked about, Chris, for the how does a young person who would want to be a farmer find out about this loan program?
This program is decades old, and this is ministered through the Farm Service Agency, the United States Department of Agriculture. If an individual just Googles, if you will, USDA, Farm Service Agency, USDA, FSA, they will be able to find their local county USDA office. There are over 70 some, maybe 72 county offices in Ohio. Almost every county has one, or has one just a county over, and they can call, or I would suggest in this environment that they call, not just show up. 4 months ago, we could have just showed up, but
Right.
now that's not a good idea. So just call and make an appointment and tell them you want to talk about a farm loan for a young person that wants to get started, and they will put you in the right track.
Great. And then my one other question is to everyone that sees this video and that is currently watching: is there some action that you feel like we as citizens can do to help you?
Is that a question for our
That's for our panelists.
Okay.
Tell me what I can do to help.
I would say, this is Roger.
Well,
I would simply suggest that everybody take advantage of their right to vote, and do that early because of the mail issue, the post office issue, and to encourage all of your friends and neighbors to do the same, and to be well to study up and vote judiciously. I used to say early and often, but I don't think that's appropriate anymore.
Yeah, there's already folks being accused of voter suppression and all sorts of interesting things. So
yeah,
I don't want to be accused of anything.
Just vote once.
Yeah, ditto for Roger for me. Most of the problems that we're discussing today are small p political problems that if we had the right people making the right decisions on behalf of we the people rather than big corporations, we would be well on our way to addressing this and making the rural economy much stronger.
Yes, absolutely.
The only thing I would add to that real quickly is you got to pick a fight. I honest to God, just don't sit back and take it, because regardless, I mean, I just spoke to another guy who was running for out in Iowa, JD Scholten, who was running for Congress out there. And I told him, I said, and I shared our particular organization's plan to combat this crisis in the dairy. And I showed him a plan that we had. And I said that, when you get there, you're going to have to build bipartisan support. You're going to have to get everybody in Congress working on this. And I think the thing that's frustrating for me is what I've seen sometimes out of Congress thus far is nobody really wants to deal with the issue. They kick the can down the road and they come out with these platitudes and these talking points, if you will. And it's like, you're there to serve. You're there to be a servant leader. That's what you're there for. And I just, what I want to see again, I want to see, like he said, just serve the people and put this country first, and put your constituents first, put your country first, put these family farms first.
Yes.
And that's my last 2 cents.
Mike, we shouldn't have to convince people in Congress that eating is a bipartisan issue. That's for sure.
That's true.
Now we can't hear you now, Elaine.
Oh, you've lost me again?
There you are. Now I can hear you.
Oh, geez. Okay.
We can
I
hear
just
you now.
said, you know, it is that thing of everybody has to eat.
Everybody has to eat.
If we could eat local food, that makes so much more sense.
But I think even getting contagious diseases in this country is also a bipartisan issue.
Well,
I'm not sure how. But yeah, absolutely. Eating is a bipartisan, it should be a bipartisan concern.
right. Well, if there's nothing more to say, I just want to tell you it's been a gift to me.
We can't hear you again, Elaine.
Ah, come on. Now?
Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
I have to get
We can hear
close.
you.
Is that it? I'm not close enough. I just want to say that it's been a pleasure to meet all of you, and I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. And I won't forget what you've shared here today. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks again, guys.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye now.
I know.
Take care now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay, I'm leaving.
Bye-bye.